Hey, welcome back to the channel. I'm Cassidy, your guide in love, pleasure, and purpose. In today's episode, we're going to be talking all about cycles, and particularly how cycles show up in women's lives and how you can navigate and work with these cycles in order to find more alignment and flow in your life. So if that sounds interesting, then stay tuned. So when we look around at life, at nature, we start to notice that everything in life, everything in nature is in cycles. We, of course, have the cycles of the seasons, we have cycles of life and death, and then individually we have cycles of expansion and contraction. Cycles are life, they're all around us. Now, women have a particularly deep connection to cycles because of our menstrual cycle and because of the way that we grow life and give birth. But when we look at the structures that are set up around us in our society, we can start to notice that they really aren't optimized for women's cycles. Most workplaces follow the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday structure or something similar. And this is really a lot more optimal for a man's body. A man has a daily hormonal cycle where their hormones reset every 24 hours. And this is really optimal for being able to show up every day consistently and, work in a steady way like that. However, a woman's body, of course, has closer to a 28-day, give or take, cycle of fluctuating hormones. So while in one phase of her cycle, she might feel that energy to get out and accomplish and do the things, in another part of her cycle, she might feel like just being alone, not doing anything, going inward. And unfortunately, our society, for the most part, is really not set up to allow for a woman to follow her cycle and to respect the impulses of her body. So, a really important part of embodiment as a woman is learning to tune into the rhythm of our cycle and to really listen to the body's needs at different parts of the cycle. Now, when we don't do this, it can really start to create some imbalances and some challenges in the body physically and energetically. And that's something that I definitely experienced even as early as high school. Being a teenager who has a menstrual cycle, but still needing to show up every single day at the same time to school, no matter how I was feeling. I remember getting horrible, horrible cramps to the point where I would have to go home, and sometimes I would even end up vomiting from the pain. And looking back, there was this expectation that there's no difference whether you're in a female body or a male body. You show up every day and you're expected to be consistent and to perform every day, regardless of what's happening in your body. Now, when I was about 17 or 18, I went on to hormonal birth control, which actually suppresses the cycle entirely. So instead of getting this fluctuation of hormones throughout the month, your hormones are basically just flatlined. And so for many years, this hormonal birth control really suppressed the ups and downs of my cycle. And over time, this meant that I just became really disconnected from my body because I couldn't feel the ups and downs. I couldn't follow that natural rhythm that would have been present otherwise. So, years into being on birth control, I found myself working really hard in real estate as an agent and getting started with my husband, Matt, in our real estate investment business. And I was really showing up for the grind, showing up, trying to be consistent every day, showing up no matter how I was feeling and getting done what needed to get done. but I really started to feel burnt out. As I started to tune into my body more, it just didn't feel right to be putting those hormones in my body anymore. So I decided to go off of the hormonal birth control and get a copper IUD instead that has no hormones. And I was able to then start to feel the ups and downs of my cycle a little bit more at that point. And I'd be trying to work consistently, but then I'd be wondering, why is it that one week I feel super motivated, like I can tackle anything on top of the world. And then the next week, I feel like everything is overwhelming. I don't want to do anything. Nothing is working. When I started learning about the phases of my cycle, it brought so much understanding and self-acceptance to my changing energy, my changing moods, and really helped me to start to live in a way that was more in alignment with what my body was needing at any given stage in my cycle. And I didn't only notice this with myself, but also with clients that I coach when I walk them through the phases of the cycle. I see this light bulb go off. It brings so much self-understanding and self-acceptance. In the following years, I had 3 or 4 years after that where I actually didn't even have periods for the most part. And that's a conversation for another episode. I'm going to do another episode soon with my whole fertility journey. But even during that time, I still honored the changing energy of my body and honored the cycles of the moon. And we'll talk in a moment about how our bodies and the cycles of the moon are connected. All right, so let's talk about the phases of the menstrual cycle and the qualities of each of these phases. So let's start with the menstrual phase itself. That's, of course, the part of our cycle where we are bleeding, we are releasing, shedding, letting go. And this lines up with the winter season. It's the time when things are more still and more dormant. This is a really good time for turning inward. For the most part, we tend to want to be in our own space. We tend to get a little bit more introspective and feel more sensitive as well. So you can honor this phase of your cycle with a lot of rest, with opportunities for reflection like journaling, and with nourishing your body with warm and hearty foods. And the winter menstrual phase is also associated with the new moon, the time when the moon is at its darkest. Then next, we move into the spring phase, which is called the follicular phase. And this is when your hormone levels are starting to rise again. You're starting to feel this fresh energy in your body, and it has that springtime quality. It's all about new beginnings, new possibilities. And this is a really great time to put new projects in motion or to make plans, really to plant seeds for yourself. And this spring phase is also associated with the half moon. And then we move into the summer season, which is during ovulation. This is typically the time when we feel the most energized and when we feel like our energy is most outward focused. So this is a really good time for social events or for things like presentations. This is the time when you just feel like getting things done, like you're unstoppable. So take advantage of that energy and try to schedule those things like social events, presentations that require that energy during that ovulation time so that you have great energy to bring to it. This summer phase is also associated with the full moon. Then after the summer phase, we start to move into fall. So this is also called the luteal phase. And we're moving toward the menstrual cycle again. This is when our energy level starts to drop a little bit and our energy starts to turn more inward. This is a really good time to wrap up projects, to tie up loose ends, to organize, clean things. It's a really good time just for like completion. And you might find during this part of your cycle that you're feeling less like going out, socializing, being in that outward energy, and your focus starts to turn more inward. During this time of the cycle, we can also start to become aware of things that aren't working in our lives or that don't feel like they're in alignment. So it's really good to notice those things as they arise. Often that can show up in the form of like heightened sensitivity, right? Irritability, or those other symptoms of PMS that we often notice. If we really pay attention to those, there's often something underlying that's not working for us. And this phase is a really good opportunity to do that investigating and to look at different areas of our lives a little bit more closely. And this is again associated with the half moon in the fall. Then, of course, from fall, we move right back into winter, back into the menstrual phase again. So, in the fall, if we really listen to our body and start to notice that turning inward, then we're prepared when our cycle comes back around to winter. We're prepared to take that rest, to take those couple of days or few days to just go inward and to really nourish ourselves. Now, all of these things, of course, are generalizations, and the most important thing is that you listen to your body and just notice how your body and your energy and your emotions change over the course of your cycle. It can be really, really helpful to track these things, whether you do that in a notebook or using a cycle tracking app like Clue. It's just really helpful to notice over the course of several cycles, how am I feeling during winter, spring, summer, fall? What kind of emotions are coming up? What are my energy levels like? And then over time, you can really start to organize your days and organize the events of your life to correspond with when your energy is going to be most suitable for that kind of event. And what I really started to notice is that when I really listen to my body in each phase of the cycle and really honor it, give it what it needs, then I started to have less swings, less dramatic swings. I had less pain during periods. I had less big emotions during that fall phase before my bleed. Everything just felt a little bit more smooth. I still had the changing energy of the cycle, but paying close attention to it made it a lot more smooth and fluid and less dramatic. I also find that really understanding the phases of your cycle and how you experience them really starts to bring a lot of self-understanding and self-compassion, because I don't know about you, but I used to feel a little bit hard on myself when I would be like, why can't I find motivation today? Like, what's wrong with me? But then I started to learn about my cycle and I would realize, oh, I'm on day 26. Of course, I'm not feeling motivated. Let me shift my focus to something that's more appropriate for this phase of my cycle. Now, one thing to note is that our culture in general tends to be very summer obsessed in many ways. So, if we think about the summer phase, it's all about things coming to fruition. It's about productivity. It's about results. It's about the outward energy, outward appearance. And this is really highly celebrated in our culture. The winter phase, however, is really not as celebrated. The need for rest and stillness and quiet and inward focus. But if you look at the winter, it looks like everything is still and dead and nothing is happening. But it's not true. Really, beneath the surface of that layer of snow, So many things are happening underground that are preparing for fresh growth in the spring that will then lead to that full fruition of the summer. So every season of the cycle is equally as important. Each season has different qualities, and each season is valuable in its own right. So what I would love for you to take away from this exploration of your cycle is to really listen to your own body, to get curious about how your body fluctuates throughout the course of your cycles, and then to really honor those changes and give your body what it's needing and not forcing it to do what it doesn't want to do. It can also be really, really helpful to share these ideas with your partner, if you have a partner, so that they can also understand how your energy and emotions are changing throughout the course of your cycle. Also, you'll notice how your sexual energy will change throughout the cycle. And for your partner to understand that as well will be really helpful when it comes to navigating the flow of your changing desire throughout your cycle. And the other thing to take away is that you really don't have to fit yourself and your body and your emotions into these rigid structures. I would love for you to find ways to organize parts of your life to have more flexibility and to shift with your changing cycle. Now, maybe you do have a job that requires you to show up every day consistently, but maybe you can bring some of these conversations into your workplace and just start to open up a conversation to get curious about how can we account for women's changing energy throughout the month. Are there some things that we can do to give some grace to a woman when she is on her bleed and trust that she'll bring extra energy when she's ovulating? Having these kind of conversations with coworkers and with friends as well is so helpful, just to open up the dialogue and to help more women get curious about their own cycles, and hopefully to start to shift how we approach cycles in different structures in our society. All right, well, that's all for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, I'd really appreciate it if you leave a like and make sure you're subscribed to the channel so that you don't miss any more episodes. And please share this episode with a friend, because we can all use a little bit more information about how we can connect to our bodies and how we can honor our changing cycles. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.